Okay, YouTubers, this is Joe from ArtAlienTV, another game of interplanetary I Spy going on here. Now, some of you may be familiar with my website, artalien.space. Now, this used to be called artalien.net, so if any of you are having trouble finding it, that's all you've got to do is change the name slightly, and then you'll get to this site, which has been up, I think I built this about 5 years ago, and basically is how I started doing all this stuff. And there's extensive articles on here and some of these pages about everything from ancient astronauts to Mars, Moon, Antarctic pyramids. There's Egyptian stuff here, ancient Egyptian stuff, zombies, everything. So give it a look if you want. There's plenty to read and lots of pictures to look at, and there's lots of my videos on here as well, which correspond to the articles. So do check that out. And also, if you haven't already, there is my ArtAlienTV app, which is completely free. You can have it on Android or on your iPhone, or you can even have it on your desktop. This has extensive links to about 20 million or more, actually more than 20 million images, because it's a multi-app. Basically, what I did, I've got all the NASA apps as well as some others, space apps, and I built them all into this one. So basically, this is a very extensive research tool. You have all the missions here, going right back to the Clementine and before the Apollo missions in the 1960s. You got right up to date as well. There's all sorts of useful stuff here. This will link you to millions and millions of images. In fact, there's so many links to images on here, so many images to link to, that I couldn't actually tell you. There are so many. Bear in mind that there's approximately about 20 million images just of Mars that have been taken in the last 30 years. So bear that in mind. 30 or 40 years, that is, sorry. And you can probably double that when you add on all the other images of all the other things and bodies in our solar system. So do check this out. It's got a lot of stuff here, and you can keep up to date with my videos here and some of the other top sort of anomaly channels as well. Okay, so that's a pretty cool tool to have on your device. You can have it on your laptop or on your mobile phone or on your tablet or whatever you like. Okay, so there we have it, and it won't hurt. When you download it, your device might say this may harm your device. It will not harm your device. It's absolutely free. There's no adverts on it. There's no Trojans or viruses on it. It's completely safe. So don't worry if you get a little warning thing come up when you try and download it. Right, let's crack on, because there's a lot to show here. And I'm doing a little bit of an update on the Mars house, which I published a couple of days ago, which in fact was found by Martine Graney, as it says in the video. So full credit to her for this find. She does get trolled quite a lot, like I do, so give her a bit of love on Facebook. You will find her on my channel, my Facebook page here, which is Mars Magazine, ArtAlienTV Mars Magazine. But you'll also see her on the Mars Discoveries and Solar System Anomalies page. So check that out. That's a really cool Facebook page there, with about 75,000, no, nearly 73,000 members now on that. There's also the Zoom Club, which is run by Thomas Jensen. You'll see Martine on there. She often posts stuff on there. And these are really good sites to look at, because you'll keep really up to date with what's going on. Anything from space news to anomalies, anything like that, you will see them on these pages. And there's lots of researchers adding stuff to these pages now, and you'll often see this way before it ever gets on any website or in the news or anything like that. So do check those out. I'll have links to all these below in the description as usual, as well as all the image links. Okay, so let's crack on with it. Now, the best way to view the Mars house, as I've called it, at Armagosa Valley, I should say, is to look at it on the Gigapan. I'll put links to these below also. In fact, it shows up on at least 2 Gigapans. There's this one as well. Now, unfortunately, this is from Sol 952, but unfortunately we've lost the edge of it here because the camera didn't actually look further to the left. But you can see it's there. But in this one, you can't zoom in quite so far. But you can definitely see the same thing, which is here. Hang on, there it is. Now this is the better one to look at. This is Sol 753 or MSL 753, Mars Science Laboratory. And in this one, if you look over to the left here, there's also an interesting structure here, which may or may not be intelligent, don't really know, but there's something going on there. And if you look really carefully, now it's actually very difficult to work out how far away you are from this thing. It looks like, if you look at the individual image, it looks like you're only about 1 kilometre away from it, but in fact I think it's much further than that. I think it's more like 3 or 4 kilometres, a couple of miles maybe, possibly a bit further. And when you zoom out of the bigger pan, you can kind of get an idea of where you are and where it is. And of course, the zoom on this camera, on the Mastcam, on the rover, is very powerful. It can zoom in for about 10 miles or so. So this is probably zoomed in already about 1 kilometre, okay, which it usually does. It rarely takes photos that aren't zoomed, especially when you've got lots of background. So it's already zoomed in 1 kilometre, and this looks actually now about probably half a kilometre to this ridge line. But I think it's something like another couple of kilometres from this ridge line here, which is kind of in focus, to this sort of out of focus part here where the so-called house is. And then you've got this part of Mount Sharp, which is even further back. And what we're seeing here is a ridge line in the foreground. You've got this kind of part of the mountain here. Then you've got the other part of the mountain here, and another ridge line behind, okay, which is all this bit. And you can see these bright structures here. There are hundreds of crazy structures on Mount Sharp, and occasionally we get a really good glimpse at what we're looking at. And this is a good example of that. And if you go over to the right of this image, you can see lots of domes and pyramid type structures. Now I have done videos on these before, and I will show you some extra images of these in a minute. Okay, this is a massive ziggurat type structure, and it has a huge building next to it as well. And there's huge domes up here, and I'm sure not all of them are natural. Some of them may well be, and some of them may well not be. But what you've really got to do is go through all the gigapans. You go on the Gigapan sort of menu page, and you really need to start looking at all these images and all these different sols with this sort of stuff in the background, and you can sort of compare them on different days with different lighting and from different distances and different angles, and you can start to sort of work out what you're looking at. Now, to all intents and purposes, this so-called city, which a lot of us researchers now refer to it as, kind of almost looks like it's sat straight on top of this ridgeline, but it's not. It's miles behind it. You've got a lot of these undulating hills and burial mounds and all sorts of weird structures and ruined buildings in the foreground, which are mostly buried in sand and rubble. These long ridgelines, a lot of them are not natural because a lot of them are very straight and contain ruins, buried ruins. But the really big stuff is up on Mount Sharp here, and this is big. I estimate this to be something like 100 feet tall. It could be even bigger. It could be a bit smaller. So I'm estimating around 100 feet, just to be on the safe side. It could be about 150. It could be only 60 or 80. I don't know exactly, because we don't have a scale for the image. But that's based on my experience at looking at a lot of these things on this ridgeline here. But one thing I do want to point out is the fact that there seems to be something going on here right next to it on the right of the building. And there seems to be a structure here that is kind of bleached out, and you can't really see any detail. There's also a lot of similar stuff here around the same sort of luminosity. So this is the same distance, this stuff here, as this stuff here, okay? And this mound is another one of these big sort of mounds that stick up near the bottom of Mount Sharp, okay? But some of them are absolutely huge. One way to tell how far away something is to look at the density of the shadows. Now, this is called luminosity. Now, when you look at the luminosity of this shadow on the building, it's very, very similar in darkness and intensity to this shadow here and this shadow here. So basically, this is approximately the same distance as this kind of mountainous part here, okay? But when you look at the back of this, up here, suddenly the shadows become much more faint, which it expresses that they're probably much further away. And you can approximately work out that something that's half as dark, like this line here, as this is probably almost twice the distance. Now, this isn't an exact science. This is something you learn when you're a painter and artist like yourself. Or if you do photography, you'll realise that the closer objects are much darker. If you look here, these are much closer, and you have nice dark shadows. And then double this distance, you have the shadows only half as dark, or even less than half as dark as these ones here. Okay, so, and then they get fainter again as we go further back. So you can work out what's behind what's in front by the intensity of the darkness in the shadows. Okay, that's trying to keep it simple. I mean, there are more complex ways of working these things out, but when you're looking at a mountain which is inside a crater, it's quite difficult, and some of these things stick up, some of them are behind, and when you're dealing with quite low quality images, it's hard to tell. But there seems to be something behind here. You have this long, almost train-like structure here with what look like carriages, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Now, these upright lines that you can see going through this long structure, are they really there? Now, are they compression lines, or are they really there? I think some of them are really there, but I also think some of them are also compression lines. Now, Nev T has done a good job of cleaning up this image already to get rid of a lot of that blocky compression marks, and they often come out as vertical lines like this. So it's hard to say with any real assurance whether this is actually an intelligent structure behind it or not, but it goes right across here, and then sort of goes into this kind of dome-like thing, and it comes right out the other side. Now, if these are buildings, which I'm sure some of these are, like this thing here, and this pyramid here, this ziggurat, and this huge dome, then you've really got to start looking at this mountain in a different way. And I have been saying this for about 3 or 4 years now, that Mount Sharp is not just a mountain. This is what looks like a ruined city, ancient ruined city, and there are buildings and structures all over the place, and you can start to piece together that some of these things are related and may have been built over many different periods. This place could have been inhabited thousands of years ago. The civilization may have fallen and been replaced, and other people may have moved in. We really don't know what's happened on the ground here in the past. A lot of this is guesswork, but as with ancient Egypt, you have civilizations that come and go, people invade, people hang around for hundreds of years like the Romans did or the Greeks did, and then they gradually go again and they get replaced by someone else. The Persians may have taken over, I mean, Egypt itself changed hands many times in ancient times, and we may be looking at something similar here where Mars may have been invaded by aliens and taken over by aliens. We really don't know what's happened. There may have been many types of Martians that fought each other and fought over this area. I do still stand by my view that this is an important place with some religious significance, and many burial mounds and religious iconography and statues can be seen in the area, as I've shown in previous videos. So do check out my statues and other artifacts I've found, because it's all starting to make a picture now. But basically what I'm trying to say here is that this may be partly an optical illusion, because if you look carefully, there's this thing sticking out here, which you can see something sticking out. Now, this may be part of the building sticking out here, okay? And you can see a lighter part here, but is it joined to this here? It kind of looks like it's joined. Now, if you look on the other version, this is much grungier, and I can't zoom in anymore, but that shadow isn't as prominent, but the problem is this is probably taken from further back and slightly different lighting conditions, but there seems to be something joined here that's joining to the front of it. So we may be seeing what is partially an optical illusion here, but there is definitely something here. Now, whether it's actually an intelligent structure, I think it probably is. It may not be, but it certainly looks like one. and you can see that there's something trying to join onto it here. It's very hard to say. Of course, in here I've enhanced the images in the video, as Martine did in her original clip, which is in here at the end. There's a full credit to her here. But some of these things don't quite make sense, because this almost looks like it's joined to the background, but I think what it is, you're actually seeing part of the so-called house structure here, and this bit sticking out just happens to line up with these shadows in the background, which are much fainter. So I think these are actually behind the so-called house, and this is closer, and then this ridge is closer still, and then these rocks at the front obviously even closer again. So we have quite a complex image here, because we have lots of different things at different distances, but I do think this is on the same level as this stuff here, this kind of light material which looks like some kind of collapsed building. And sometimes it's better to look at the image from further back a little bit as well, because if you get too close you can't see as clearly. And in fact, if you look at the raw clip there, you can see what looked like windows here before this is enhanced. So all I did was darken it. There you go, and you can see these kind of dark structures here, which could be windows. We don't know. And if this is a building and it is 100 feet tall, or possibly could be 200, could be less. It does seem to have chimneys on it. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 or 6. Hard to say exactly. Now, some of this may be behind it. In fact, this whole thing may be joined to this background. This reeks of an image to me that has been doctored heavily by NASA, and it looks like they've been scrubbing some of the detail out here. This may be why some of this stuff doesn't quite make sense. It looks like it's been scrubbed and blurred out. And the thing is, if this is a row of chimneys, what does that say about this building, if it is a building? It says to me that it's probably an industrial building. It's not just a house, as I've called it. It may well be a forge or some kind of industrial building that would have needed lots of chimneys to extract various gases or whatever, if they were burning or melting or smelting or whatever. There does seem to be a lot of gold in this area, so it wouldn't surprise me if there was a gold smelt furnace inside that building, if it's a building. It could well be. There could well be a smelting furnace there for melting down precious metals. We don't know. Pure speculation, of course, but it's a large building with lots of chimneys, or at least it looks like that. But this may well be, like I said, a case of NASA scrubbing the image and removing a lot of the detail. This may actually be joined to this here, and a lot of this may be an optical illusion. And in the negative, you can actually see the windows here. Okay, if they are windows. And these have been blurred out a bit as well, these upright kind of chimney-like structures, but they're there. They are there. So we got some quite interesting details here, because it's very large, and even though it's probably a couple of miles away, at least a couple of miles away, you can see some quite good detail. And I was careful not to add any detail that's not here, like some people do. A lot of people on these Facebook groups are kind of drawing details on rocks and saying that it looks like a face and this or that, which I don't agree with. You should only enhance the details that are there, and it's easy for people to check this out, because all they have to do is compare it to the raw image. So you've got to be honest with these images, and when you darken them and enhance them, you've got to be careful not to add unnecessary detail which may put people off, because you will get accused of doctoring the images, just like NASA do. And there's Martine Graney's image. I'll show you hers up close here. I've got it here. She's done a nice job with it, and she's kind of lightened this bit of shadow here, which I showed you, but that is artistic preference, and that's not necessarily a bad thing to do, because basically I do think that a lot of this detail is behind. And you can see there's sort of chimney-like structures here. But are we dealing with an image that's been doctored, and is all this joined? Hard to say. Leave a comment below if you think so. It may well have been. It's very hard to tell, like I said. Now, how are we doing for time? Right, we've been going about 20 minutes now. So let's move on from that. Now, there are some other similar things that I found nearby here, and I'll try and keep this short. Now, this is another thing that was posted on Facebook recently by a number of people that spotted this. And Nev T has been really good on these, because what he's been doing is showing some of these Chemcam photos, which are really quite interesting. Now, first of all, I'm going to show you this thing in a so-called raw image from NASA. And you can't really see anything. I think it's this one. Now, if you look just off centre of the image here, you can just about see a white object sticking up. Now, this is one of the images that you get where it's got this grid on, and you've got to remove that with a bit of Gaussian blur, about radius of 1 to get rid of it, or a little bit of field blur will get rid of it also. But the thing is that a lot of the, once you've done that, the image is then very hard to look at because it just looks fuzzy. And so what I did, I made my own little mini gigapan, my little mini pan here, and this is it, the two images stitched together. You can see where they've been joined, and I've removed that grid from the image, and it's quite a pasty image, black and white obviously, grayscale, but it's fairly clear, and you can see that upright object, but it's just a bit fuzzy and out of focus. And there's also these buildings up here, this thing here, which is really weird. That's a building. This is a building, as I've shown before. And there's also multiple structures over to the right here. Now, like Level T, I thought to myself, yeah, why don't I look at to see if this shows up in the Chemcam images, which are completely different to the Mastcam. And here we have it. And this has been enhanced by NASA already, and you can clearly see a very straight, extremely straight white pillar that looks like it may have been part of this structure here and may have been part of a bridge. There may have been a bridge across here which is now collapsed. This may be a pillar for a bridge. Don't know, pure speculation, but I really can't see how this could be construed as a natural object. And lots of people pointed this out, and it is often worth looking at these Chemcam images because they're often, well, they are better quality because they haven't been downgraded and they haven't been over compressed, and they even give you a ping image as well. Not even, this is a ping, a PNG file, and they're much better quality than the crappy JPEG browse images, or raw images as they're called, from NASA. These are much better. There's much better detail in here. There is lens barrel distortion here around the edge, so you've got to kind of ignore the detail around the outside and concentrate on the central part of the image, because there is distortion from because it's like a fisheye lens almost, so you do get distortion. But look how clear that is. Now this is miles away from the rover. As we're looking at Mount Sharp, there's this valley that goes up. This is sand here apparently, and is very dark blue. And I'll show you it in context here. Now I got the so-called raw images, and I put them together and I've processed them and added a bit of colour to show you kind of what it looks like. But when you zoom in, it just looks like a blurry piece of crap, because basically, A, the camera isn't zoomed in as far as the Chemcam was, and B, this is taken from a JPEG, and JPEGs ruin a lot of the detail. They add straight lines where they shouldn't be and get rid of straight lines where they should be. So many of the problems us researchers have are purely down to the fact that the images are JPEGs. And here's a clip of that thing again. This is from the Chemcam image. Look how clear that is. A lovely sharp edge to it. That is an intelligent structure, absolutely no doubt about it. And it's probably hundreds of feet tall from here to here. I can't tell you exactly, but it's very large. And it may be part of a bridge or some kind of building that's collapsed. This looks kind of interesting. Is on the same level here. Now this, at one point, this was a river. So there would have been water flowing down here. Okay, so it would make sense that there might be a bridge there. Okay, but that's my opinion. It could be something else. It could be a tower. It could be some other kind of structure. But it is an intelligent structure. Look at the straight edge of that, and look how out of context it looks to everything else. Completely looks foreign. Doesn't kind of match anything in the local topography here at all. that is an intelligent structure. And I'm really certain about that. It's one of the most certain ones you're going to see, because the quality of the image is good. The line is extremely straight, it's very symmetrical, and it's way brighter than the surrounding rock. Okay, so there is that one. Let's crack on with it. There's a lot to see here. Now, some of you may have seen some of my previous videos where I showed what looks like a dome entrance. Now I'm going to show you some of these clips. Now these are from Sol 1302, so these are very recent also. And they show some nice detail. This is an enhanced version of the mountain here. The lower parts of the mountain anyway. And you've got all these crazy domes and buildings up here which look like a city, and it probably is a city. I think a lot of us researchers have already established that probably a couple of years ago. And I'll just pick out some of these, because what I'll do, I'll probably come back to this in a later video and do a full video on just this set of 1302, because there's a lot to see in here. But I found this one, whereas the dome is down here. Hang on, I can't find it. There's so many images here. I've got a lot of stuff in here. I'll tell you what I'll do. I'll just show you this, because the dome, which I showed in a previous video, I think actually is this one. Yeah, you can see it here. The Mars dome entrance. You can actually see it. There we go. Here's the dome, and here's the entrance to the dome, and what I think over to the right of it, it may be a kind of railway or some kind of aqueduct or something like that. There's a very long straight structure, but we can only see part of it here in this image. But the actual dome entrance itself looks very interesting. You can see into it. Now this image has been cleaned up, and I've really tried to clean it up here. It's quite dark, but I wanted to bring out these shadows. I'll show you the small clip I've got of it here, which has been treated slightly differently, but this is from a less treated image, and you can see the compression lines going right through this, because of course when you enhance the contrast, it also brings out all the crappy information you don't want. So if you push the contrast too hard, like I have done here, the images basically start to break up like it has done, and it looks pretty terrible. But you can see here into this structure. That is an entrance, and there's something intelligent here. I only wish we had much better close-ups of that, and we may well get some at some point soon, because the rover may look back at that again from a slightly different angle, and may look into it even. So we may get a really good angle on that in coming months. So there was that. But this is also, I also looked at the ChemCam images from the same Sol here, Sol 1302, and I've got the ChemCam images here, the round ones. And I started looking at the background here. Now, these are showing the details near the edge of the Gale Crater. Now, this is not Mount Sharp, this is Gale Crater, and about 20 miles away from the rover. You have these really interesting images of a dried out riverbed here, which would have been flowing down the edge of the crater into Gale Crater. Okay, so I made my own gigapan with these as well to have a really good look, because it does help to get them in context. Now, full respect to Nev T for what he does, because I've tried to do it here and I've got all these lines going up and down. I don't know how he does it without leaving these lines in. I don't know how to do that, but for the purposes of this video, this is okay. Now, what we're looking at here is over on the left. There is a whole bunch of buildings here. Now, these images are much less downgraded than the Mastcam images. These ChemCam images are probably more trustworthy in many ways, because they're clearer and less downgraded. So if you see a square object, it's probably a square object. Like I showed you with that pillar, that white pillar, it really picks out symmetry much better, and you have here what looks like a ruined town or a bunch of ruined buildings here. You have rectangles, uprights and squares, an interesting structure here sticking out of this thing, whatever that is, underneath. Now I appreciate that's a bit vague, so I will put clips of these in at the end and I'll enhance them a bit more. There is actually I've got an enhanced clip here. There we go. Now I've darkened it, and you can clearly see there's a kind of building here There's another one here, and there's a strange structure here which sticks up, which looks like a huge building. Now this is 20 odd miles away from the rover, so these must be huge to show up in any detail from that distance. Now the camera is zoomed in a long way, obviously, and they've shot the laser at this area to get some luminosity readings from the material on the ground to try and work out what kind of material we're looking at, because it can read from the spectrometer, the light spectrometer on board. It can actually read the reflection it gets and work out exactly what kind of density that the material on the ground is. And from the density reading, you can work out what kind of rock or metallic substance you were looking at. So there we have it. I'll show you the raw clip of that. It doesn't look much until you up the contrast, like I have here, and I've added some colour there to pull out these details. Now, for things to show that clear from 20 odd miles away, these must be enormous, huge structures. There's some crazy stuff in this Sol 1302. I really recommend it. You've got some amazing details here, and there's a huge wet patch here, a huge damp patch of sand here, which is one of the biggest I've seen on this ridge line in one of the images. So it's well worth going through the whole set really with Sol 1302, and have a look at the Chemcam images as well, because we've got these crazy details, really nice details of the river. Now this river kind of meanders down the side of the crater into Gale Crater. I think we're looking. Are we looking west here? I'm not sure. This is the west end, the west side of the crater. I think it's kind of west. I could be wrong. But yeah, there's some crazy stuff in here, and there are definitely some massive buildings, which are just up here, below this big kind of mound. You've got these buildings here. See, you can see all these square structures, multiple square structures. So it looks like not only was Mount Sharp inhabited at some time in the past, but also the crater was as well at various points, with huge buildings. And we are only seeing the really large ones like you see up here. Some of these are massive. Some of these are 1,000 feet tall, some are 800, some are 500. But some of these domes and structures are absolutely enormous, because they're still showing up as very large, even from a great distance away. So we're looking at a culture that was building on a much bigger scale than us in many ways, even more so than the Egyptians or the ancient Babylonians. They've got enormous structures, and they are almost impossible to get your head around when you have, especially when you have so many together. There's also this thing. Oh, let me show you these actually. Yeah, I'll show you these structures up on the top of Mount Sharp here. Now this is Sol 1286, also well worth a look, and I think you probably get this on the Gigapan as well. I've got some Gigapan clips here. This is a clip from the Gigapan, as you can see. It says Gigapan there. Huge domes. Now this is one of the best angles you're going to see these from. This is zoomed in quite a long way, and you see some good detail. This is a raw clip, and you can see like massive windows and structures on these things, these domes. And this dome here has two smaller domes next to it. These are buildings. These are not all natural structures. They are heavily eroded. A lot of them are heavily ruined. They may have been bombed. The cataclysm may have destroyed much of the structures here. There could have been huge skyscrapers here for all we know. I doubt it somehow, but I think these are more ancient structures like you would see in Cairo, in Egypt. But there are loads and loads of these things, and I'll just show you some of them now, because I will come back to these at a later date. Here's the giant ziggurat thing, which I previously published from a different angle. Very interesting. Now, before we saw it from further over to the left, and we only saw this building up to about here. But you can see that there's another big structure on this building here. This is this giant ziggurat, which is not a perfect pyramid. But ziggurats are more complex than pyramids. They've got a more different levels to them and stuff like that. They're not a straight triangular structure. They have a lot more to them. But that was interesting. I'll show you there's the raw clip, which looks pretty terrible. But when you up the contrast, it really brings out these shadows. You can see the shapes of these buildings. That's a bit more enhanced there. So I will have clips of these in at the end as usual, and I will come back to these. Let me show the enhanced clip of them, because they were cool. Pretty grungy, I know, but this is from a JPEG. So what I would like to see are some ChemCam images of these domes and structures on the top of Mount Sharp here, or on the side of Mount Sharp I should say, because they would look a lot clearer. And these do look intelligent. They're heavily eroded, but these look like intelligent structures here. And you can see other structures in front of them and behind them, and there's some crazy details here. And let's have a look at this one. This is a giant dome. This is insane, this thing. And you can see this on many different sols from different angles on different days. But it has a huge square thing on the side of it. What is that? That doesn't look like a natural structure to me. Look at this. Look at this structure here. A huge, great big thing, like a tower that's partially collapsed on the side of it. I mean, this is insane. And there's... Now, this may be natural, but that looks pretty straight to me. That may be a collapsed tower of some sort. There's some crazy stuff here. And it doesn't help if you actually turn them to negative as well, some of these things, to really look at the outlines and silhouettes of them and work out what you're looking at. I'm not saying all these things on the mountain are buildings, but I'm saying a lot of them are. And look, if you look at the ziggurat, I mean, look at it. Bear in mind that this is many miles away and it's still massive. And look at this structure in front of it here. Is this natural, or was that carved out of the bedrock? I mean, this is insane. Some of this stuff is so big. I have had some people contact me saying they think a lot of these things are like a massive spaceship, and we're just seeing bits of the same thing. Could be, who knows? I did do a video a while ago, about a year or two ago, saying that I think that the whole of Mount Sharp may well be an artificial structure underneath, but we have lots of sedimentary layers on top of it. Who knows? I would imagine there would be many tunnels and lots of water underneath Mount Sharp as well. There may be lots of lava tubes that are full of water. They could even contain life. I would imagine a really good place to look would be underneath Mount Sharp, and to see if there's any caves full of water. And there could well be many species of small animals that live there, you know, and live under the mountain, inside the mountain. There could be many types of creatures, like living in the water, that would be under here, because this is the bottom of a lake bed. And I would imagine if you go down far enough, there'll be plenty of water. And if a lot of it's filtered through the mountain itself, may well be drinkable. Not all of it would be this saline stuff that NASA go on about, highly salty saline water that's not fit to drink. Some of it underneath here may be well fit to drink, and it may be very pure. So there we go. I won't go on any longer. This has been long enough now. I'll just quickly show you this, because there's those structures I was on about here. Yeah, just up here. Now, I have covered this one before. That's a massive building there, ruined. But this one came out much clearer in this image because of the angle of the sun. This thing here. That's a building. Let's show you the clip. There's the clip. That is a huge ruined building, and you look at it in negative, you can clearly see there is rectilinear symmetry going on here. So multi structures on Mount Sharp, and they are all over the place. In fact, I found one earlier. Let's see if I can find it here. I've got a lot of stuff here, so bear with me. Is it in here? Oh god. There was one structure, and I haven't got the folder up, so what I'll do, I'll put it in at the end. If I can find it, I'll put it in the end of the video for you, and I'll have a lot of these clips in at the end, so this will be quite a long vid, so my apologies for that, but there's a lot to show here. And like I said before, full credit to Martine for finding this giant house type structure. She's done a hell of a lot of work over the last 2 or 3 years enhancing some of these pictures, and she does a good job. So full credit to her. Give her some love on Facebook, give her the thumbs up, and thanks for watching, everybody. I will see you soon.